Good morning, everyone. This is Bob Thorne here. I'm a Senior Applications Engineer here at Hexagon, and it's my pleasure to present to you this morning this Introduction to Designer Wireframe. Now, we're just waiting on a few stragglers joining the meeting. There's quite a lot of you on this meeting today, so I'm afraid I've had to mute all of the microphones. And as you can see from the image on screen, that you can actually submit any questions about what you're about to see and anything after the webinar to bob.thorne@hexagon.com. And as I say, I'm just going to wait a few more moments. I don't want to delay it too much because we've got quite a lot to get through. But what I want to do is just give the stragglers a few minutes just to get signed up. I am recording this webinar, so for those of you that don't get to see it, or for those of you that want to share it with colleagues, then the recording will be made available later on after the webinar. Okay, I think we'll make a start. We've got lots to get through. So we're looking at Designer Wireframe. Now, Designer is a very powerful direct 3D modeler. And it's very quick and easy to generate 3D models. However, there is still a time when you need to generate 2D geometry in order to construct 3D models. And that's where Designer Wireframe comes in. We call it Wireframe, but essentially it's the 2D drafting tools of Designer. So in this webinar, we are going to be looking at an introduction to wireframe drafting. We'll show you how to use coordinates and snap filters. We're going to look at construction lines because they can be very powerful in the construction of geometry as well. We're going to use trim and extend. We're going to look at using text for cutting or modeling in Designer. So text geometry for actually creating 3D models. We're going to look at importing and manipulating third-party data, so in the form of DWG, DXF, etc. We're going to look at layers, because that's quite important in managing your 2D geometry. And we're going to be looking at using images. Now, this is quite a strange one, but I'm going to show you anyway, using images to help you create 2D geometry in order to create 3D models. So, introduction to wireframe. Now I'm going to, everything I do today will be live. So apart from this PowerPoint, obviously. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip out of the PowerPoint each time and show you Designer live. So here we are in Designer. Now you'll have to accept my apology for this gray area, which is part of the WebEx. Hopefully it will keep out of the way when we use it. So in the home screen of Designer, you will see that there is a wireframe section in the menu, and we've got a few commands in here. So we've got a subset of the complete wireframe commands, and each of these has a pull down. So you can see you've got the ability to draw polylines, tangent, bisecting. In the circles, you've got circle with the center, circle from 3 elements. So that's a subset in the Home tab, but you have a dedicated wireframe tab, and here you can see we've got a much more extensive set of commands for producing wireframe geometry. Now, unfortunately, because of the time constraints today, I'm not going to be able to share all of the commands with you, but hopefully I'm going to give you a flavor for what wireframe can do, and you will go off and explore for yourself. So let's start by drawing a simple wireframe. So you can see here that I'm drawing basic lines. Now you'll see that my wireframe is very narrow. So the first thing I'm going to do is just introduce, if we drop back here, the Drawing Styles Manager. Now this is where you can actually control the style of your particular wireframe. So this controls all of your 2D drawing functionality, but in particular, we're looking at wireframe. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go straight into the Windows. I'll just escape out of there. We're going to go into Windows, Drawing Styles Manager. Now in here, I've got access to all of my various types of geometry and in effect, how I'm going to display it. Okay, now I'm just going to, in this instance, just going to look at the geometry continuous, and I want to change the thickness. So down here, you can see mine is currently set to thin. I'm going to set that to thick. So it'll make it easier for you guys to see what I'm actually drawing today. Now, if you want to keep that as your default, you can simply save the configuration, and that will then become my default. So in future, I will draw with thick lines, okay? You can always restore the default and you can always save a new configuration if you wish. So if I save that now and I go back to my wireframe and I draw a line, you can see that I've got a very thick line there. So it's much easier to see. Let me just very quickly start a new drawing and then we'll have a look at some of the basic wireframe commands. And Designer Wireframe is very powerful indeed. And in prepping for this webinar, I've learned so much about the depth and breadth of the wireframe commands. It's a really powerful 2D drafting tool, not only just a 3D modeler. So what do we have here? We've got lines, we've got polygon. So let's have a polygon. We'll put a polygon down there. And you can see that it's just so easy to manipulate this polygon. So I've got a 3-sided polygon. I can rotate, I can expand, I can change the way it's actually described. So I can circumscribe it in a circle, I can inscribe it inside a circle, or I can specify the length of the side of my polygon. And then I can simply click on here and, sorry, let me zoom out so you can see that. I can click on here and you can see that I can create a multi-sided polygon. So it's incredibly quick and easy to generate geometry. And there's a whole host of these commands under these various menus here. So let's look at one other. We'll look at a circular slot. So so this is like a banana tool if you were in sheet metal, and you can simply manipulate this very easily indeed. It's just so easy to get the geometry that you require. You can obviously type in dimensions here, and this is very important that when you use Designer, certainly in the early days, make sure that this menu is fully extended, because there's an awful lot of variables that you can type in here to control your geometry. It's quite nice to be able to drag it, obviously, but it's equally good to be able to specify accurate dimensions. So you can simply type in here that I want a 55 radius in there. So there are lots and lots in a Designer Wireframe. So let's start by doing a simple example. So I'm going to draw this example on screen. Very basic, I grant you, but it will bring out some of the basic functions of Designer and some of the features of how you create geometry. So I'm going to toggle back to my Designer and I'm going to start a new session. I don't want to save that one. Now, I always tend to work in the plan view because it makes it nice and easier. And the other thing to bear in mind is just make sure that your perspective is turned off. It just means you then are drawing truly on a flat surface. And having perspective can just slightly skew your view of it. So I want to draw that basic shape. So I'm going to start off by drawing a line. And you can see on my cursor, I've got 3 dimensions. And I can simply type the length of the line required, and then that is fix that line at 30 mil. I'm then going to come down here and I'm going to type 150 mil for the depth of that. I now want to draw across at 30 mil. I know it's 30 mil, but what I can do is if I come up here and I hover over that point, as I move away, you'll see that it's snapped horizontally to that location, which means that I don't have to type a dimension. I can simply snap to previously drawn geometry. As I move my cursor away now, you can see that I've got an angled line and I've got loads of dimensions around it. Now, simply using the tab key, now you can't see this obviously, but I'm just hitting the tab key on my keyboard and I am toggling between the various dimensions. So if I want this line to be 50 millimeters and then I tab, it jumps to the next one and I want that to be 45 degrees. So I've now fixed that line at 50 mil long and 45 degrees. So I'm now going to type 150. All right, so that's as far as I'm going to go. If I want to fill the screen with that image, you just click on this icon up here, and that will include all elements. I'm just going to zoom out slightly so you can see just underneath the prompt here. Now, when you're producing drawings, it's always a good idea to be looking for symmetry. Now, I know that this part is symmetrical, so I'm going to use the Designer Mirror tool, and I'm going to window around this geometry at the end, and I want to snap, and we'll talk about snap modes as we go, but I'm just going to snap to the midpoint of that and say that I want to mirror vertically about that midpoint. I'm going to right click to accept. Okay, that's important in Designer. The right click will accept. And then I'm going to accept that there. So we've now drawn something like this. And I want to now continue to close this shape. So again, I'm going to snap to the end. I'm going to come down 30 millimeters. And then I'm going to come across. Now, again, I want to draw across to this point. So if I hover over that point, drop down, I've then closed that off. Okay. Now, Designer is incredibly good at picking out closed boundaries. So right away, it's showing me that that is a closed boundary. Now, I'll talk more about this as we go through, but that is very, very important in 3D modeling. And Designer is absolutely fantastic at discovering those closed boundaries. And we'll do an example later on that will bring that out even further. Right, I now want to draw a circle. So I'm going to come down into the circle command and I just want a circle with radius. Now this is important. I am set in my snap filters to enhanced pick. And as I say, we'll talk about more about these, but there's a range of different snap filters here. But by using the enhanced pick, if I hover over that point, you'll see that I get X, Y, and Z coordinates. Because the circle I'm about to draw, I want to reference off of that corner. So if I type 25, 25, 0, that puts the center of that circle 25 mil in that direction and 25 mil up off of that corner. And now I've got my circle in the right location. I can either drag out the size, I can click in here. Now, whenever you see this menu in Designer and there's a value in there, you can actually type the value if you wish, or, which I find is really fantastic, if you scroll your middle mouse button, it will change that up by 1 millimeter. So if I want that to be 12, I simply done that by using my middle mouse button. Obviously, in your menu options over here, you can actually type your value in here as well, and you can actually toggle that up and down with these arrows if you wish. So there's always, in design, there's always many ways in which you can interact with the software. I've just right-clicked to accept that circle, and I'm going to exit out of there. Now, again, it's symmetrical, so I might as well save myself a bit of time, and just use the mirror command. Again, I'm going to pick my circle, I'm going to snap to my midpoint, and it's remembered that I'm mirroring vertically, so it's now included that, and if I accept my mirror. So again, I've got my two circles in there. I'm just going to put some more geometry to finish this off. So I need to start on this point. Now this is, again, I think a fantastic feature for me. I want to draw up. Now I know that the dimension I want to draw is 30 mil off of this top edge. So if I snap to that top edge and then I get my XYZ coordinates, I can type 0, 30, 0, and that puts me 30 mil above that point. I don't need to know what that dimension is. I just know that that has to be 30 mil off that point. I'm now going to come down, I'm going to hover over that point and then snap there, and then I'm going to come down and snap there. Okay, if I refresh my regions, you'll see that again, Designer has found a closed border, even though I've got these extra bits of line in here, it's actually found that as a closed profile. So I want to get rid of those extra lines. So in Wireframe, in the modify option, you've got some trim elements, trim and extend commands. So I'm just going to use the trim command. Now, again, if you watch over in your dialog here, currently I'm set in the mode, I'm set to remove. So in effect, anything I select will be removed, not added or extended. So I've simply removed with a trim the elements that I don't require. And that's finished that particular profile. So if I accept that, and then we have a look at that in isometric, what I'm going to do now, because I want to create solids from this, I'm going to find that profile, and you see how well it's found the closed profile, and I'm just going to extrude that up. And if I accept that and cancel, now the wireframe that I've just produced is still there. I've not lost that. So if I go to my layers command, you'll see that under layer 0, I've got a solid, which is that. And if I turn that off, there is my wireframe. Now that's useful because I can use that in other construction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to go back to extrude. I'm going to select this and I'm going to extrude it down. Okay. And what I also want to do is I want to include that circle and that circle, because I'm going to extrude this down and I'm going to put a draft angle on it, and I'm going to accept that. So if I come back to my layers and we have a look, I've got the original solid that I created. I've got the second solid, okay, and I've still got my wireframe. So I can still continue to use that wireframe for construction. So what I could do in here is I could say I want to extrude that one and that one. Now, the reason I didn't include it in the first extrude was because I added a draft angle, and I don't want to add draft angle to the holes. So if I accept that and I set my draft angle to 0, and then I'm going to drop this down, drop this one down like so. We'll make sure that that's 0. And I'm going to make this a subtract. So in effect, what I'm doing is adding those holes through the second extrusion. And so I'm using that wireframe geometry to create multiple extrudes. So wireframe geometry is very, very important. If I go back to my layers, I can turn off the wireframe, and there is my model. So that was a simple example just to get us into using wireframe. Another concept inside Designer Wireframe is the use of construction lines. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how we can use construction lines to generate geometry. So again, I'm just going to toggle back. I'm going to create a new drawing. I won't save this one, and I'm going to look at that plan on. Again, making sure my isometric is turned off. So in wireframe mode, when I've drawn lines previously, I've been actually drawing segments. So I'm creating segments. If we change it to lines, in effect, what we get is a continuous, infinitely long construction line. So I've created 2 construction lines going through the center of my origin. If I accept that, and then I come back to wireframe, I'm going to use the offset command. So this is, again, a very useful command, and I'm going to offset that by 300 mil. If I zoom out, you can see that. I'm then going to do the same this side. So we'll go back this way. And we'll come up here. Accept that. Down here, we'll come down 400. And then we'll just come in here. 150. And we'll do the same here. 150. Okay. So there are my construction lines. And if I exit out there, if I go to my layers, now I keep coming back to layers because layers are very important. It really does allow you to manage the data very well. So everything I've drawn so far has gone automatically into layer 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename that layer and I'm going to call it construction lines. Okay. And then what I want to do here is I'm going to rename this one and I'm going to call this one profile. So this is the profile that I'm going to generate. Now you need to make, if you want the data that I'm about to draw to go into that layer, you need to make sure it's the highlighted layer. So currently you see construction lines has got the filled in folder. If I double click on profile, I've now made that the active layer. So if I now go back to my wireframe, and this time I change back to segments because what I want to do is draw a solid line. If I now click, I can actually simply click on the intersections of my construction lines, and I'm using my construction line geometry, which makes it incredibly easy to draw, in this case, a letter M, for no other reason than I can think of anything else to draw using construction lines. However, hopefully you can see that that was very quick and easy to generate those construction lines. Now, again, because it's layered, it's quite easy to come in here and just turn that off and then work solely on my letter M. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my circle command in Wireframe and I'm going to say circle through 3. And that allows me to just click on those 3 elements and form a perfect circle or arc that joins those 3. And again, you'll see that designer's region has worked out where the closed profile is and is showing that to me. So I'm going to do that same command again, and we're just going to do there. And then what I'll do is I'll go into a fillet command. So we've got a fillet command in our wireframe option, and I'm going to select a fillet between this line and this line. Now, you can see I've got a dimension here for my fillet. I can drag this. I can click in here and use my middle mouse button to change the size. But this is really nice. Against most of the measuring options or most of the dimensional options in Designer, you get this little ruler. If you click on that, it takes you to the measurement menu. And in here, you've got lots of options in order to control the measurement or the dimension of the feature you're about to draw. So I want that radius to be exactly the same as that radius, but I've got no idea what that radius is. Well, I do now because it's 92.705. But that is using the measurement tool to pick dimensions off of other geometry to allow me to generate what I require. So I've done that. Again, I've still got my close profile. I'm going to add a few more fillets in here. So if I hover over here, you see by hovering close to 2 lines where they intersect, I can generate a fillet. So I'm going to just make that 12. I'm going to do the same over here and make that 12. And then this one and this one we'll say is going to be, I don't know, we'll make that 30. So there is my closed profile. Now, again, I could simply extrude that. Designer will pick that out, okay? It will pick the letter M out and ignore these. But just for good housekeeping, I'm going to trim those excess elements away. So using the trim command, I'm in the remove option. I'm just going to point to these elements and remove them. And again, you'll see that Designer is recalculating that closed region as I go and showing me what is closed and what is not. So there is my finished letter M. Okay, if I'm happy with that, I can go in and say, right, I'm now going to extrude that. If I do something like that, and then we take this up here, there is my letter M, accept that. And again, if I go back to my layers, I can turn on my construction lines. So I've still got those if I want to use them later on for other geometry. So that was using construction lines inside Designer Wireframe. Right, moving on, because I'm conscious time is flying by. I've got so much to show you guys. Right, snap filters. I'll be quick on this one, but it's important that you understand the snap filters. And as you can see here, I've got a blown up view of the menu, which makes it easier to see. And we've got a range of different options in terms of our snap filters. So let's come back to Designer. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a new drawing. We won't save that one. Straight onto my plan view. And then we're going to, in Wireframe, we're going to do maybe a polyline. So I'm going to click here and draw a polyline. Now, a polyline, as it suggests, is a series of connected lines with a number of sides. And it doesn't matter how many sides, you can simply add the number of sides you require. By right-clicking, I accepted the polygon, but that gives me access to these points where I can manipulate this and I can move these around. And I can click in here and type the actual coordinates for that point. So again, if you've got coordinate data of a layout, then you could quite easily generate that and use that coordinate data for this. If you don't want a point, you can simply hit the X and it will remove the point, but continuing to close your profile. Right, I'm going to accept that, and I've got a closed boundary. So we're going to add a bit more geometry. We're going to come in here and add some circles. Now, I've got my snap set to enhanced pick, but you could set it to nearest. So what that means is that Designer will snap to the nearest point of my cursor. So if I come in here, but you'll notice I'm unable to snap to the center. And that's because this is a polyline. Okay, so if I just do this, if I want to put a circle in the middle there, then what I'm going to have to do is go into Wireframe, and I'm going to use the dissolve command. And what that does, by clicking on that element there, it's now dissolved it into its individual line segments, which can be very useful if you want to do additional manipulation of this geometry. Now, I've got it set so that it creates different colors, and you probably can't see it very well with the, no, you won't be able to see it very well here, but each of those lines is a different color. So if I accept that, and I can maybe turn that off, I still don't think you can see it very well, but these lines here are all different colors. But what that now means, if I go back to my wireframe and I want to add a circle, and I go here, you'll see that I can now snap to the midpoint of that line, which means that I can draw the circle where I want it to be. I'm just going to draw a couple of circles out here as well, like so. Right, the whole purpose of this exercise was to show you the snap commands. So if I go into line drawing, at the moment I'm set to nearest. So if I hover over here, it picks up on the arc, but not a specific point of the arc. And the same here, it will snap to the arc. So useful, but not accurate. If I wanted perhaps to draw a line and snap to the quadrant, I'm going to use this option here, which is the quadrant of the circle. So that will snap onto the 4 quadrants of that circle. So if I want to draw from that quadrant to that quadrant, I know I've accurately snapped to the center, or sorry, the midpoint of that circle there and the midpoint there. Okay. You've got other commands, like, for example, you've got intersection. So if I want to draw the intersection of that line and that arc to the intersection of that line and that arc, I just need to hover close to both and it will find the intersection. So with these snap filters, it's a good idea to have a play with them and just see what you can achieve. You've got things like equidistant point, so you can work between that point and that point. I mean, I didn't need to because there was a midpoint there anyway. So what we could do is we could snap to nearest and we'll just draw to there. Okay. Now, again, all the time that I'm drawing, Designer is working out the closed profiles. So you can see I've got a range of closed profiles. I'll just do a couple more lines and then we'll maybe draw. Oh, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let's go up here. We'll draw across there and we'll change our mode. So at the moment, I'm in the point environment. I'm going to change to the element environment. So let's go into lines, go to the element environment, and that means I'm going to pick an element as opposed to a specific point. And that means that I can draw a tangent. If I zoom in, you'll see that as I move my cursor, it's snapping tangentially to that circle. If I want to do the same there, I've actually drawn a tangent between those circles. Do the same over here. Now this is because I'm in the element environment. I'm able to now snap to that arc as a tangent, and we'll do the same there. Now, if I refresh my regions, you can see, let me just explain what these regions are doing and why it is so powerful. Because if I now say that what I want to do is extrude that shape, I can extrude that element. If I do a multiple choice, you'll see there that I can then extrude additional items. I can find all of these closed profiles. So that is very powerful. Not a lot of CAD systems can do that, and Designer does it incredibly well. So I can pick out a whole host of different enclosed profiles without me needing to trim all this graphics, all this geometry off. I can just simply extrude the closed profiles that are within that set of geometry. So that was using snap tools. As I say, I can't really go through all of them, but they are very powerful and it's well worth a play with those. Right, now we're going to look at using text for creation of cutting. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, and let's go in and show you, I'm going to create some text. So again, we're going to go into a brand new designer session, and I won't save this one. And then I'm going to come up here and we're going to say, oh, sorry, let's just come in here and. Okay, so here are my annotations. I've got text and I'm going to add some text. I'm going to do it as standard text and I want to make this 21 mil high. So if I bring that in and drop that in there and accept, I can then come into solids and extrude, and we'll just get an isometric view. So there's my text, but you'll notice that I can't select it to extrude. So that was actually generated as standard text. So I'm going to simply return to the front view. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to put that text back in. So into annotations text, but this time I'm going to use create text as profiles, and that will make a dramatic difference if I click that down and accept it. And then if I come into my isometric view and say that what I want to do is go solids, extrude, and we do that, you can see that straight away I've extruded that text as a 3D model. Right, okay, well, if I wanted to machine that text, what I'm going to do is I'll just hit the undo on that again. And this time what we will do is we will actually put a rectangle around the outside. So into Wireframe, I'm going to go into rectangle. I'm going to do 2 points from the corner, and I want that to be 5 and no, I don't want to do 5 and 5. I'll just do something like that. So we'll just do it around the outside. Okay, I'll just do that around the outside like so. So if I accept that, you'll see again Designer has found the closed profile. If I come in here and I want to go solids, extrude, I can extrude the outer profile and I've got my text. I just need to include in here the inner part of the A and the inner part of the O, and there is my text extruded. Now, if I was to cut that, what I'm going to find is that A, the center of the A and the O, are going to drop out. So I'm going to undo that another time, and then we're going to come in here and we're going to use the the geometry manipulation to actually create a tag so that we can tag that center of that letter in. So in Wireframe, I'm going to go to lines. I'm going to snap on there and draw to there. And then I'm going to go Wireframe and I'm going to go offset. Now I want my offset distance to be 1, and I want to offset there. So if we just accept that, so we've got our offset. Okay, now I want to trim that, so I'm going to extend it. So extend that portion up to, so we're going to go into extend, and we want to extend that to there. So that's now extended that element. I also need to trim that as well. So I'm going to trim that there, and I want to trim that, and I want to trim that. So I've trimmed that A out. We could do the same with the O. So let me very quickly draw a piece of wireframe from there up to there. We'll again offset that. So wireframe offset, pick the entity I want to offset, accept that, and then we're going to extend that line to here. Now it's shot down in both directions because that's an ellipse. So what I'm going to do is just trim out the bits I don't need. So we'll go trim, and we'll trim out the center of the O. Okay, so we've trimmed out the letters, and now if we do a solid extrude, you'll see that what we've got are the center of our A tagged in and the center of our O tagged in. If I go here, you can see we've got our text, which we can cut from a block. Okay, I just want to show you this feature, which has really got nothing to do with the cutting of the text through the block, but I think it's a really cool feature in Designer. And then we're going to look at the plan view, and I'm going to, in my wireframe, I'm going to draw a curve. I'm going to start by drawing up here. So I'm just basically drawing a spline, in effect. Give me a bit more room and we'll come over. Okay, as before, I've got these points, so I can maneuver these points as we did with the polyline, and I can type in coordinates. But what I want to do is just accept that. I've got my curve. I'm now going to go back to my annotations, and I'm going to put some text in. I'll use the same font and the same wording, but I just want to make that 14. Okay, and I'm going to say wrap to an element. If I pick a point and then an element, that text is now on that spline. And this is what I really love, is if you drag that now, I mean, look at that. That is just so fantastic. I know perhaps you forgive me for getting too excited, but the technology behind making that text follow that curve is great. Okay, and then if I click on there, I can place that down. Now, again, because I've created that on a curve, it's just done it as standard text. So what I need to do is go into Wireframe and say dissolve all of that into its separate elements, and then I can say solids extrude, and then we can do something like that. Now, I've missed the circle out in the middle, so what we could do is we could go back to solids extrude, we could come around here and we could find the center of the O, and we'll do the center of the A. I can come in here like so, and we can accept that, and we can extrude that as a subtract. So we've now included the center of the A and the O, and I've done it over a nice squiggly line. So I just think that's fantastic. So I had to show you. I couldn't let the opportunity go by without showing you that. It's great if you're into sign writing, etc. So please have a play with that. Right, I've got to move on. As I said to you right from the beginning, there is so much functionality in Designer Wireframe. I could quite easily sit here all day showing you bits and pieces and learning bits and pieces because I'm still learning. Right, what I'm going to show you next is extracting profiles from already created 3D models. So there are occasions when you need to extract geometry from 3D models. So to do that, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open up this casting. So let's come in here. So we've got this casting, okay? So a model which is made up of multiple bits. And if I come into my layers, you'll see that what I've got is a base and a top. So I'm going to move that out the way. So I'm going to go translate. I'm going to take that top and I want to move that up by minus 200. Okay, and we won't copy it. We'll move elements and we'll say yes to that. So I've moved that up out the way so you can see the two halves of my model. Now, what I want to do is I want to generate or create a gasket that fits between these two castings. And the gasket's going to sit on this face. And that is so easy in Designer. So if I come in here and I say extract edges, you've got various options here. And I want to use edges of a face. So you can see you've got loads of options for extracting edges. If I come in here and just hover over that face, I've now created a series of curves. And you can see the curves displayed around the shape there. So if I accept that, and again, come back into my layers, I'm going to turn off my base and my top. And there is my wireframe generated from the model. So it's a separate set of wireframe data. So it's not connected to the model. So it means that I can manipulate that and do stuff with it. All I'm going to do at this stage is just go in and say, let's extrude it, window around that. I want to go in the other direction and I want to come up, make it a 2 mil gasket, I think. Okay, so there's my 2 mil gasket generated from the profile that I extracted from the original model. Now I've still got my wireframe. So if I come into my layers, you'll see there's the wireframe. I'm just going to turn that off. So I've just got my gasket. Now I'm going to make that gasket out of cork, okay, or leather, whichever you want. So what I'm going to do here is going to go into Windows, Materials. And if I said, right, I was going to make it out of leather, I've got me a nice leather texture. If I come in here, I'm going to make it out of cork, I've got a nice cork texture. So if I window around that and say, assign this material to that gasket, there is my cork gasket ready to go in between my two elements. So let's go back to my layers and let's turn on my base. So there's my gasket sat nicely on top of my base. And then we're going to turn the top back on like so. And then what we want to do is move that back down. So we're going to translate that back and we're going to do that at 198. So that now sits back where it should do. And as you can see, I've got my gasket between the two elements. Now, again, whilst I'm here, I can't go without just mentioning the rendering or the texturing in Designer. Very overlooked. It's part of Designer. You can add textures and images, textures, relief, etc., reflections, all of this, and you end up with some really nice results. So in effect, I think this is a whole new subject for a webinar. I haven't got time to show you any more on the Designer materials, but you can generate some really nice images, and you can print these images to quite a high resolution. So you can generate some really nice graphics of the models that you create. So that was extracting geometry from existing models. Right, I need to move on because this is taking longer than I anticipated. I'm now going to be working with imported data. Now, when I mean imported data, I mean things like DXF, DWG files. So let's go straight back and import a DXF file. So if I go into a new session, I don't want to save my gasket. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, and I'm going to go Insert. Now, if I come into here, you'll see all of the file types that I can insert into Designer, and it is rather extensive. But I'm looking specifically today for DWG or DXF. So we're going to look for that. We're then going to go into some here, and we're looking for a DXF file called plate.dxf. We're going to insert that. Now, there's a lot of various options here that you can do prior to import. So as the file's being imported, you can simplify splines, you can import work planes, and so on. So I won't go through all of these, but it's worth having a look at these, because if you consistently have to manipulate your data once it's in, by setting these up before you bring your files in, invariably they will come in the form that you want. So I'm just going to accept my defaults, and that will bring in my DXF file. Now you see here that it's come up with a report. Now, if I just expose that, what you'll see, it's a very simple report, but it just gives you some feedback about the DXF file that I've just brought in. So it tells me, for example, that it's AutoCAD version 12. So it's quite an old DXF file, and the total number of entities in the file. So some useful information should you need it. I'm now going to have a look at my DXF file that I've just brought in, and we'll go straight to the layers. So you can see it's brought in the layering structure of the DXF file, and I can hover over all of those. Now, if all I want to do is generate a 3D model from this DXF file, I don't need to manipulate any of the data. I can just rely on a designer's region calculation to work that out. So let's go solids, extrude, and let's hover so I can do that. But you'll see here they've got the detail line around that. So what we want to do is we want to include that. There's also this bit here. Now, if I accept that, that has extruded that part. So I don't need to do anything more except this bit here. And for some reason on this DXF file, it will not extrude that bit. It's either down to this dimension line or this dimension line, but I cannot select that and it extrude it. What it will do is it will just fail. Okay, so what that means is that I've got to do a bit more manipulation on my layers. So let's have a look at what we've got. So we've got something called table, and as you see, as I hover over it, it highlights it in the drawing. So I don't want the table, so we'll turn that off. I've got the border, the drawing border. I don't really need that either, so I'm going to turn that off. I've got the dimensions. I can turn that off. And then we've got something called bend lines. I can turn that off. This is all still there if I need it later on. But for the purposes of generating a 3D model from this, I could actually simply now come in and say, let's extrude that. And then we will get an extruded part. So as you can see, I've extruded that very quickly from an imported DXF. I'm just going to cancel that because I want to actually add some additional geometry here. Now, I'm working with green lines. I don't like green lines. So what I'm going to do is just simply going to hover over that, and I'm going to go to Edit Properties. That takes me to the properties of all of these lines. You can do it individually, or you can do it en masse. And you can see there's the green color of my lines. I want to make this maybe a nice blue color. So I've now edited the properties of those lines and made them blue, which makes it easier for me to see. So what I want to do here is I just want to add some additional geometry. I'm going to rectangle. I'm going to say select a position. I want it on the center, and I want it to be 5 by 5. And what I'm going to do literally is just draw some corner relief in this part, because there's no corner relief on this part. So I'm going to accept that. I'll do one more. So I'm just snapping to that point, and I've placed down this little rectangle. Okay. So we've got our rectangle there. Accept that. We want to now do some trimming. So we're going to go into Wireframe Trim, and I'm going to select that entity. Again, I'm on the Remove option. And again, you can see that Designer is showing me the closed profile. It's working it out as I work on the geometry. So I can see I've got closed regions that will allow me to generate 3D models once I've completed my edits. So I've just got one more to do. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to select those elements there. And so what we've got is our corner relief. Okay, if I'm happy with that, I can then go solid, extrude, pick on my face, and if I come around to an isometric view, we can simply drag that up and accept my extrude. So there is my part with my corner relief added. So that was working with a DXF file. As I said, all of that information is still there. So if I want to switch it all back on, I can simply come in here and put all this information back on. So not only have I got the original DXF file that I brought in, I've got a 3D model that I created, and that's sat on top. And that is using imported data. Now we can import DXF, DWG, IGES, and obviously lots of other 3D formats. Okay, so what I want to do now, moving on rapidly, is come in here and we're going to, now this is a slightly strange one. I'll show it to you. I think it's quite useful, but some people think it's too inaccurate for enhanced 3D modeling. But sometimes when you are asked to produce something, all the customer can send you is a PDF file or an image or a photograph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a JPEG file to help me create this part. So now there is a trick to this, or there is a limitation, in so much that you must have a dimension, otherwise you'll never get the correct scale. So what I've got is in my DXF file, sorry, my JPEG file, I've actually calculated the size of the image in comparison to the dimension that's on it. And that means that I can scale this. So first of all, I'm going to put some lines on here. And I'm going to draw a line, in this case, of 974. And if I zoom out a bit, and the next line is going to be 675. Sorry, let's do that again. Right, so I've got my two lines. Now, if I go to my layers, and again, in this instance, it's very important that you structure the geometry and the image. So those lines were drawn on layer 0. So I'm going to rename that to scale lines. So this allows me to manipulate this later on. So there's my scale lines. I'm then going to change this. I'm going to rename this layer to image, because that's where my image is going. And then I'm going to create one more layer on here. And I'm going to say I want to rename that to, we'll call it part. So this is where my part's going to exist. Right. So if I double click on the image folder, that makes that currently active. So now I'm going to go and insert. And again, if I change my file type, you can see I've got all of these. I'm looking for images, and I can import bitmaps, GIFs, JPEGs, PNGs, and TIFFs. So we do that, and we're looking for a bracket JPEG. So I'm going to insert that. Now, this is where these lines come in, because the image has to be this size in order for it to be correct. So I'm just going to snap the image to those 2 points. And as you can see, I've now got my image. So that's just a JPEG file that I've got off of either a PDF document or whatever. So what I want to do now is recreate that. Now I'm going to have to do this quite quickly, but obviously the longer you take over it, the more accurate you're going to be. So literally, I'm just going to sketch around the outside. Now, obviously, this isn't good for manufacture. If you're going to manufacture this, you need to do it precisely. But if you just want a part that you could perhaps generate a quote from, or you could do perhaps some investigative nesting or whatever, you can actually get something very quick and very easy from just snapping around here on these various points Sorry, I'm not actually snapping that. I should make that absolutely clear. I'm not snapping. I'm just doing this by eye so that it isn't snapping to the geometry or to the image. That's purely me drawing that by eye. Now, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to draw a line that comes from there all the way across to here, like so. And then what we'll do is I need another line for construction purposes. So I'm just going to draw a line that goes from there, and I'm going to draw it across again to there. Right. So I've got my lines in there. I've got some circles here that I need to put in. So I'm going to go to wireframe circle. Let's just do a circle, and that's a radius of 60. We'll do that. And then what we'll do is we'll just say, now again, I'm having to do this by eye, but we'll just put that one down there, and we'll do something similar here. Okay, so we've got two circles there. Now the next ones are quite easy, because if I change that diameter to 40, and you remember that in my snap filters, I can actually snap to the center of a circle, so I can put that one in, which is central of that one. Right, I'm going to leave that there for now. I just want to do one other set of circles, and that's from 3 elements. And that was the reason for this construction line. So I can snap to there, and to there, and put in an arc. And I can snap from there to there to there and put in an arc. Okay, and you'll see that I know I bang on about this, but Designer has worked out the closed region for that shape now. So it's starting to look like a part. What I'm going to do here is go to my layers, and we're going to turn off the image layer. Okay, oh, yeah, that's my fault. What I didn't do is make it the active layer. So now I've got the image and the lines on the same layer. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to trim some of this unwanted geometry out. So if we go to wireframe, first off, I don't need that line at all. So what I want to do is turn that image off. If I turn it off, I'm going to lose it. So let's just come in here. Is this going to work? I wonder. Let's see. Let's do that. That's better. So we can now see that. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say I want to select that line. Accept that. And then we're going to delete that line, and then we're going to go. So all I did there was double click on the image and lock it so that it didn't interfere and it didn't get picked when I was trying to pick geometry. Had I drawn it properly, I could have switched the layer off. Okay. But in my rush to get through this, I've obviously drawn it on the wrong layer. Not to worry, I can now come in here and I can trim this unwanted geometry out, this unwanted geometry. We don't want that, and finally need to come in a bit closer. And there you go. So there is my shape. Okay. Now, I don't know if you can just see that there. In the image, the actual dimension of that on the image was 330 mil. So this is the test. We'll see how big this part I've drawn is. So if we highlight that and put dimension down there, look at that. Even rushing, I've been able to generate a part that is the correct size and shape that came in on an image file. So the more time you spend on it, the more accurate it's likely to be. Now, again, I'm not saying that that replaces accurate engineering drawing. It doesn't, but it does get me to something that I can perhaps maybe do an extrude of to create a solid, maybe to calculate weight or volume or do some nesting on it. So if I come in here and say I want to extrude that shape, there is my model that was generated from that JPEG file, and it's pretty accurate. So I'm quite happy with that, although I drew it on the wrong layer. I've actually got a shape that's the correct size. Right, I'm going to do one other. I'm conscious that I'm running out of time. So what I'm going to do is going to do one other, just to very quickly show you it works quite equally on logos as well as 2D drawings. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to come straight in here. I'm going to say File, and I'm going to go Insert, and I'm going to insert an image. And I've got the hexagon logo. So if we click on there, now I'm not too worried about the scale on this because I'm not working to dimensional drawings. Now, if I double click on that and I say I want to lock that layer, okay, we can lock that layer, and there it is. So now it's grayed out. If I now want to come in here and draw over the top of my logo, it is a very simple process of just coming in here and clicking away to complete the logo, the hexagon logo. And then I'm just going to do that. We're going to come down. I'm going to come across so I can snap to that point. Let's put my snap modes on so that I will snap to that point. I'm going to snap to that point. I'm going to come in here and I want to snap up to there. And then we'll do one more like so. So there is my hexagon logo. Oh, not complete. Let's do one other. We're going to do a line that goes, again, the closed boundaries have kicked in so it can see what we need to extrude. So if I was to say, right, I'm happy with that, I want to extrude my hexagon logo, I can simply come in here and I can pick that element, and we'll do multiples, that element, and that element. And so I've got an extrude there, and I can go off and extrude that. Now, if I wanted to color that the correct color, then what I could do is simply come back here and we'll pick that one. I'm using my control key to multiple pick. And then if I go, sorry, if I exit out of there, if I use my control key to multiple pick, oh, I got the images, picking up the image, isn't it? I don't want the image. Tell you what I'll do, let's do that. Let's delete that. I delete that image. Anyway, I can, if I want to, I can grab that and I can say that what I want to do is go into here and I can color it whatever color I want. And if I get the colors wrong, marketing are going to string me up. So I shouldn't really play with the colors of the hexagon logo. But you can see here that I've colored those three elements a blue color. So that was working with images to create geometry. It's not a precise science, but it gets you a very long way. Now, that unfortunately brings me to the end of this webinar. I really appreciate you guys sitting in and taking part. As I said to you, there is so much in Designer Wireframe. You could spend a whole day going through some of the features and functions. It is very, very powerful indeed. I said to you at the beginning, any questions? I saw some questions come up. I apologize for not responding to those. My brain only has a certain bandwidth. And whilst I was concentrating on the webinar and getting some of it wrong, I missed some of your questions. So what I would ask is that you email those questions to me. If I can't answer them, I know lots of people that can, and we will formulate a table of all the questions and all the answers and email those out to you all for future reference. I have recorded this webinar, and as I said, we will make that recording available to those of you that would like to see it again or pass it on to some colleagues. So thanks again for tuning in. Keep a lookout. There are some great designer webinars coming in over the next couple of months. So keep a lookout for those, and we hope to see you all soon. So again, thanks for taking part.